Welcome to Central Valley Writers Workshop. Our Great Valley is home to many writers and authors, all of whom are looking for tips, tools, and techniques to improve their writing skills. We hope that you will get all of this and more as we interview authors and experts on our show. I'm your host, Claudia Newcorn, author of the Chrysalis Chronicles of Fairy, an award-winning fantasy fiction series, freelance editor, writer, and Modesto Bee community columnist. Today we have with us McKenzie, author of Beavers Big Problem. Michelle is a children's writer, and she's going to be sharing with us the challenges of writing for children, particularly when you bring animals in as the lead characters. Michelle, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Please, Michelle, you've got a very interesting background. Could you share a bit about your background and what led you into writing books?
Well, you know, it's funny. I didn't study journalism. I went to college. I got a degree in agricultural business, and then I went off to law school and earned a Juris Doctor and practiced law for 16 years.
Now, that's not the normal track to being a writer, okay?
It's not. However, I always enjoyed children's books and thought someday I'd like to write children's books. But I think, like many people, I was told, oh, it's impossible to break into that field. You're going to need a literary agent. No, you can't do it. No one can do it. It's impossible.
The usual discouraging barriers, yes.
Yes, and frankly, being an attorney was a full-time job plus. So there was no extra time to spend writing, looking for publication, researching, things like that. So I just sort of put it on the back burner.
And now, what triggered you saying, okay, I'm ready to write and I'm now going to work on my first book?
Well, I actually wrote the book, the initial draft, back in college.
Really?
And, you know, this was 1987, 88. And I had just sat down and I was just in a silly mood, and I sat down and started dreaming up a story about a family of beavers with an ice cream factory. And then I put it away for all these years, and then after I retired from the practice of law to stay home with my son, I wanted to become more involved with his education, and the pace of my life slowed down a little bit. I dug it out, kind of updated it, had to add the internet because, back then we didn't really have the internet, and modernized it a bit and researched publishers and then sent it off. But I would say the inspiration was really having a child of my own and reading more children's books and becoming immersed in them.
Now, you could have written a book for tweens or teens. Why children? Was it primarily because of your son, or did something beyond that make you feel this was the genre you wanted to write in?
You know, I think people who know me would probably say that just is probably more my genre. It's more, I've always enjoyed the young children's books, and young children I've always thought were a lot of fun. But I mean, when I grew up, I had a lot of stuffed animals, and they came out with the Toy Story movies in the 90s, right? Well, that was my world before those movies ever came out. I mean, I believed my toys were alive, and they had, it was that was just sort of my upbringing and how I looked at things. And so to me, the natural direction for me to go with writing would be in a silly children's animated kind of way.
In other words, your inner child never went away. She's alive, well, and kicking.
Exactly.
Now, you conceived and roughed out the story back when you were a college student. Now you sit down, you've read lots of children's books for your son. You're looking at your book as an author. What do you feel are a lot of the important points necessary to a children's story to engage a young reader? Because they're not going for all the tons of description and the lots of conversation. It's a very different writing technique. How did you address that in preparing your book?
Well, I think the number one thing is you need to entertain them. And I'm very interested in children learning to read in this day and age, and I think it's so important. And I feel like if you grab them at a young age and teach them how much fun a book can be, they're more likely to continue to try to read and to learn to read. So for me, I wanted the focus of my book to be something silly that they could laugh at, that would entertain them, that might cause them to say, wait a minute, did that really happen? Or, ask questions. But then at the same time, kind of sneak some bigger words in there, some vocabulary that would teach them something new that maybe this book wouldn't do, but my book might.
Now, you said entertaining you feel is one of the key elements. What other elements do you think are important for a children's book to keep their attention?
Well, definitely the pictures.
Uh-huh.
And since I can't draw a thing, I was very concerned that how would I ever get a children's book published if I can't draw good children's pictures? But in researching the publishers, I found out that most of the publishers really don't want you to draw your own pictures. They're
Really?
happy to put an illustrator with you. And that was certainly the way it was with my publisher. And then, of course, the concern is, well, what if his pictures don't look like the pictures in my head?
Uh-huh.
You know, and I have to say that it was really interesting process, because he would call me on the telephone and say, well, what does Granger Beaver look like? How does he think? What is Rodney
Really?
like? And we'd talk about the characters, so he would get a feel for them from my opinion, how they were in my head, and then he would then draw them based upon that.
As you're describing this, it reminds me of the relationship Kenneth Graham had with the different illustrators for Wind in the Willows. They would sit down, interview, maybe go to the places that inspired the author, so they could really capture what he was seeing, what he presented in the written word. Now you want visually. Did you have to sign off on the pictures when they were completed to make sure they captured what you wanted?
Well, part of them. They couldn't send me all of them, because that would be a lot. There's almost a picture on every page in a young children's book. And so they sent me several pictures and said, what do you think? How does this look? And I have to say, I was really pleasantly surprised that, particularly with Rodney Beaver, who's one of the main characters, and Granger Beaver, I mean, they were absolutely how they looked in my head. So,
How
it was really
fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, now you're doing this, when they sent you the galleys, the finished book, presumably not just with the text, but with the photos, what was it like to see this idea you had in college appear in front of you as a almost finished product?
It was a very unusual feeling, not something that fits at all with my educational background or my career background. It was just kind of an odd thing. This is my book, it's real, has a cover,
It's tangible?
it's got an ISBN number, wait a minute. It's got a copyright, this is real. And I took it down to my son's class and I read it to his class. And I'll tell you, having spent some time with those kids for several years, gotten to know them, it was a very intimidating experience reading my book to these 20 children. And here, I've tried cases. I'm not easily intimidated. But yet, 26-year-olds, looking at me, judging me as I read this story to them.
And what was their opinion of your writing?
Well, they all clapped. They did. They clapped and they laughed, and they said, you didn't really write that book. And then I showed them the back. And there's a picture of me on the back, and they passed it around, and she did write this book. And they were fascinated by that.
What a wonderful feedback loop to have on your writing. I mean, many authors don't get that unless they're doing book signings, and even then. I mean, your audience appreciated all of your work. But why animals? I mean, you could have theoretically, just as easily come up with kind of fun human characters. Why did you choose animals?
Well, I think for children, particularly young children, say 10 and under, I think animals are kind of a natural part of their world. And I think it's an easy way to be silly and to be funny is to put animals in kind of human situations. There's irony there. There's you can have them doing crazy things like riding a bicycle, owning an ice cream factory, things that are just completely nonsense. Yet I think that's appealing to a young child.
I agree very much so, because, well, cartoons are predicated on it. If you think about a Bugs Bunny, he's as human a rabbit as you're ever going to see. One of the things I enjoyed about reading about your book is you invented words, like Claude Zip has failed in the ice cream factory. Can you talk about inventing language and how you were careful, because you're dealing with a young audience. How do you not confuse them, yet the words are something that get them enjoying the entertainment factor even more?
Well, I think I had to come up with an idea that would be a part of this machine that could break, that couldn't easily be found. So I had to sort of invent the part. And the word clop zip came to mind, and I don't know exactly why it came to mind, but it did. But that turned out to be the part in the book. And I think kids like silly words, and they like silly sounds. But I think clop zip also has 2 vowel sounds in it,
Mm-hmm.
2 consonant sounds at, at the end, and it seems to be a word that will help them phonetically as they read the book. And because I also wanted not only children to be read to, but also as they learn to read,
Mm-hmm.
and as they become proficient readers in 2nd and 3rd grade, to really be able to read the book, learn some new words, pronounce the sounds, and kind of get them on their way to further reading more complicated stuff.
It's interesting because listening to you as an author, you did a story, but there's all sorts of underlying objectives behind it, helping them be a better reader, pronunciation, entertainment. It's not just you sat down, scribbled together a story and hoped for the best. There's a lot of underpinning going on here. As you said, you pulled out the story and you reworked it. What did you do about evaluating, in today's world as a mom, your characters, setting up a plot, making sure your character development was appropriate for your audience? What were some of the steps you took?
Well, when I took the book out again and looked at it, I thought, well, aside from the fact that back in the original version, he's letting his paws do the walking through the yellow pages, and you and I understand that, but today's 5- and 6-year-old doesn't have a clue.
No.
So we added the internet and put that in to do that. But also, when I developed the characters, particularly Rodney, I think having a son at this point allowed me to better understand the thinking process of a little boy and how he wants to help and he really wants to be involved, and oh, I can do that, and let me just get my toolkit and I can do that, and what do I need to do? And having not having a daughter but knowing little girls, and well, why don't we come up with perhaps this alternative yogurt product, Mommy? This type of thing. I think just human experience and dealing with kids and knowing what they like and what they do.
Did you actually write out a plot for the book, or did you just sort of have it in your head and build out as you went along?
I definitely just sort of had it in my head. It was more of a flowing thing. I would just type away and what should happen next, and what would this character do if he were,
Now, how did you make sure your characters maintain their character? One of the things that I know in speaking with authors is, there's Rodney, for example. You've got him in your head, but you have to make sure he stays in voice. He uses the words that are appropriate to his age. How did you first define your characters, and then how did you make sure they, no pun intended, stayed in character?
Well, that's a difficult question, because not being from a journalistic background, I mean, I certainly wrote as an attorney, and but I was writing legal briefs, so I don't know really how to answer that question. It's just sort of a natural thing.
Okay.
When as I proofread and as I edited my own work, I tried to make sure that his language was appropriate, that his phrasing was appropriate, and really just simple as that.
Did you involve anyone else? You mentioned as you're editing your own work, you're proofing it. Did you involve anyone else to get a second pair of eyes and give you some feedback and comment?
I'm trying to remember. I think I showed it to my husband and my parents, and I don't really recall circulating it around. More just, what do you think? And I did read it to my son before it was ever printed, just when it was a story.
The real critic.
Yeah, just to see what his reaction would be to a story like this. And and he obviously had to have the pictures in his mind, because I was just reading it from white paper before I sent it off to a publisher. And he enjoyed it, so I thought, well, okay, my audience of one, and he's probably biased, but what the heck?
What the heck? You are Mom, after all.
That's right.
You should have heard the hokey story my mother read me last night.
Exactly.
I can see him in class doing that.
Exactly.
Now, you have Tate Publishing as your publisher. Can you share a bit about the process? You submitting your work. What was that like, the experience, some of the things you didn't anticipate, and how did you respond to them?
Well, I had read an article about Tate Publishing in the Oakdale Leader years ago, and I don't recall who the author was, but I remember him talking about how they were a great company to deal with, and it was a seamless process. And so when I was researching publishers, I had that in mind the whole time, and I honestly can tell you I found it to be seamless as well.
Really?
They were extremely cooperative, extremely positive, very good to deal with. I'm used to deadlines, so I didn't have any trouble staying on deadline with them. It was just sort of, this is what's going to happen, and this is what's going to happen next, and which, from my line of work, is a totally natural way of going about something. And when we got to the marketing process, after the book was published and came out, at that point it became kind of, wow, now what do I do?
Yeah.
You know, here's the book, they're sending me to book signings, it's in the stores, it's on the internet, but now what do I do? So that is really where it, you know, turned a new page.
Well, it's interesting because, like yourself, when I first came out, I thought, okay, I've got a book out. And what I've learned with talking with people, speaking with publishers, is writing a book is 20% of the work. The marketing is the next 80%. And with rare instances, most of us have to work very hard to create the awareness, to connect with people. And at some point, I think it connects and begins to build its own life. But in those early period, there's a lot of work that has to go on as you're discovering going out. And we'll be right back with Michelle McKenzie.
Orient House, family owned and operated since 1983, offers an extensive menu of Chinese and Japanese cuisine. Voted Best Asian Restaurant by Modesto Bee readers with 2 locations, 609 Tully Road across from MJC and 3318 McHenry Avenue across from Target. Be sure to try the daily lunch specials featuring garlic chicken or tempura. That's Orient House, great for dine-in or take-out.
And we're back with Michelle McKenzie, author of Beavers Big Problem. Now you've been doing book signings. Do you do also readings, for example, for schools? Because it's obviously a school-age thing.
I do. I definitely do readings. I have enjoyed any type of child interaction that I can do, whether it's a club or a school experience, not as a sales opportunity, but just I really enjoy sharing the book with children. Again, my focus really is on literacy. And the book signings, I've been trying to do one a month since it came out. And
excellent.
Different times of the year, there tends to be more. Right before Christmas, there were more. A little bit more in the summertime. But, you know, different types of events, you know, whether it's a book signing or promoting it in a classroom or a school. Trying to get on with I had to get on Facebook. I knew nothing of Facebook, and my friends were like, well, of course you have to be on Facebook. And the publisher said, oh, yes, you do.
You have to be on Facebook.
So that was really a fish out of water experience for me. But
that's a real compliment to you, because you're adapting, as you say, to things that didn't exist when you first conceived your entire book. What do you do to create a productive writing environment? You're a mom. You're very busy with your son's career, so to speak, in school. You're out there signing books, and I know you mentioned that a second book is in the works. Where do you find time or create time in an environment that helps you write?
Well, I think for me, you know, I as a stay-at-home mom now, I think it's really funny, because when I was practicing law, I was so busy, constantly on the run. And then I thought, well, when I retire, I'm going to have so much more time. But no. And I'm sure all the stay-at-home moms out there know this. It is just as hard, or even at times more difficult, because you don't have that schedule. You don't have the work schedule and the off schedule. You're pretty much just on all the time. So I look for opportunities now that he's in school. You know, if he's in school, I might get an hour here and there while he's in school, between loads of laundry, between the horse issues. We have horses in the backyard and other things. And I just take advantage of that time. Or I have ideas, and I make mental notes as I do, and then try to write them down when I'm near paper again, and just take advantage of trying to remember those thoughts that come to mind.
Grab as they go and pull it all together.
Exactly.
You mentioned when we were talking before the show started that you've got a lot of critters at your home, including an action-packed goat. I love that phrase. Are any of them going to appear in your next book, or is perhaps serving as inspiration for what you're working on?
Well, the next book is also it's already written, and so it does not involve these animals. It's a sequel, essentially. It involves the beaver family again with their ice cream factory and the critters in the faraway land. But my animals are always a source of inspiration. And you know, people who have known me probably consider me akin to Ellie Mae on the Beverly Hillbillies. I mean, I just love animals. And we acquired a dairy goat last summer as a pet for my son. And I have to tell you, I've never had a goat before. I've been a horse gal most of my life.
They're something, aren't they?
They are hysterical. And this little goat will run around with my son like a dog, and she is just
Really?
She is hysterical. She's a whole lot of fun, and I can see a lot of future writings coming out of that goat.
What's her name?
Her name is Cookie.
I already can hear in your head a story beginning to form around Cookie, and, you know, send photos to your illustrator, because they have the strangest eyes, goats do.
The rectangular.
Yeah, they kind of look at you, and they're almost mad looking. And a friend of mine raised 2 goats, and I just remember watching them going, now they are curious creatures, but a tremendous personality. So there's book number 3 and 4 perhaps for you.
Yes.
With all the experience you've had working with a publisher, being out there in the field, is there any other advice or insights that you might be able to share with their viewers, some things that they should consider as writers that can help them become better writers?
Well, I think the number one thing that I would say is don't listen to those people who tell you it can't be done. I mean, why not you? Why not? I mean, that's sort of my perspective now is, sure, I was busy and I didn't have a lot of time when I was working and getting my upper education, but gosh, had I known now known then what I know now, I could have started writing earlier, and I think realized this type of capacity earlier on in life. Now, I don't know economically, you know, you can't quit your day job to write children's books.
That's true.
I don't think. But
not at the outset, at least.
Not at the outset, right. But it's a neat opportunity, and I think just having the guts to say, you know what, why not submit this to a publisher? Why not? What are they going to do? They might say no. Okay. How does that affect my day? It doesn't, does it? You just move on. And, you know, why not me? That's my mantra, I think.
Well, people might say you took a risk, but one could say you took a calculated risk, and you didn't have your whole life predicated on whether or not they said yes or no. I agree with you. I think a lot of aspiring authors accidentally are their own worst enemies because they're waiting for immediate success, and you got to develop a thick skin in this sport because there's a lot of rejection that goes along with it.
Well, and I want to add something too.
Please.
When my son was first born, I thought, oh, you know, maybe, I think it was when I was on maternity leave, maybe wouldn't it be fun to write a children's book? But I had, you know, and I'd already written this story, but I thought, oh, that's just too crazy and weird. You know, I better write something a little more normal, a little more mainstream. And I'd sent that one off, the normal mainstream story, to a different publisher, and it was rejected. And so, you know, here I thought, well, I better, you know, kind of conform if I want to be accepted, where actually the opposite, I think, you know, the little strange, quirky little story was more likely to get published, and in fact did get published, whereas the more mainstream was just boring.
Well, you differentiated yourself. I mean, you made something different, and clearly it connected with Tate Publishing. Looking at your second book, which I notice you haven't told the title of, now you've gone through all of this, how did you see it affected you as a writer? Has it affected the way you write, how you prepare, how you organize yourself? Because you're now an experienced author out in the market.
Well, I think the one thing that I think I have learned is by volunteering in my son's school and being involved in the reading with the students, I now recognize how they go about teaching reading in schools and how they use this accelerated reader program with Renaissance Learning for reading comprehension. And I think it's important to still write a good story and still write to entertain, but I think to market to Renaissance Learning and the AR program, I think you also need to keep that in mind when you write.
Excellent, excellent point. Basically, you have to, after fashion, package the product to suit the audience and its requirements. Well,
yes, and I think with my book, it's the actual reading level, if it were to be translated into an accelerated reading reader level, is probably a level 3.
Okay.
Maybe a 2nd grade to 4th grade book, but what I think is a 2nd grader could read it, a third grader could certainly read it, but there is some vocabulary in there that maybe a child wouldn't have until he's in 4th grade.
Okay.
But the actual ability to read the words and flow and understand the story, even 2nd grade.
Okay. Which makes it a very diverse book then, which parents can take to not only to their kids, but those kids who are reading ahead of their grade can really enjoy. One of the things that really impressed me, because I first met you at the Escalon Authors Fair, is you're deeply involved with the Friends of the Escalon Library. This is another manifestation of you as an author. Could you tell us a little bit about the group, what you do, and how it helps promote literacy in the community?
Well, the Friends of the Escalon Library is the nonprofit organization that supports the Escalon Library, and it's open to people from the area. We meet quarterly, and basically we provide the funds necessary for things like the summer reading program, the bell ringers, all of the clubs and organizations that come and do programs in the library, for the library. We also provide some of the materials budget for new books for the library. And when I was asked to be president of that organization, I wasn't sure what to expect, but it's been a very good experience. We have an ongoing used book sale, which is our primary fundraiser for everything we do, and it's every day the library is open. This book sale is ongoing. Books cost anywhere from 25 cents to $1, and we have children's books, novels, we have psychology, we have
what a great opportunity.
Fiction, nonfiction, and then we also have the Buck-a-Bag room, which is the lobby, and once things get rotated out, or if they're in not as good condition to be on the shelf in our conference room where the most of the sale is, they get moved out to the lobby so you can get a bag of books for $1. And it's a tremendous way to support your local library and also get terrific books.
Well, to me it's a wonderful way to fundraise and also promote reading, because people may not be able to either wish to spend or be able to afford to spend, but that doesn't mean they can't read. I would encourage people listening, the Friends of the Library groups I know support all of the area libraries, and Escalon, Modesto, Houston, everywhere, so it's something people should take advantage of. As we're coming to the close of our show, I would like to invite you to join an author's tradition which we call Pulling the Pineapple. Authors who've been on the show are invited to add their book to our growing collection of people who've been kind enough to interview, and I'd like to have you add Beavers Big Problem to the list, please.
All right.
And you're available, I believe you said you're also available as a audiobook, correct?
Yes, actually the paperback comes with a digital download in the back of the audiobook, so you actually get 2 books in one when you purchase the paperback. There's a code in the back. You can download that to your computer or your phone or your MP3 player.
Great idea.
Additionally, the audio alone CD is available at tatepublishing.com. And there's also an e-reader available at tatepublishing.com.
You are really catering to your audience, who is one digitally active group of people.
Well, I'm learning.
You're learning the whole thing.
Locally, the book can be purchased at Beardsley's in Modesto or Vineyard Pharmacy in Escalon, and at Hickleby's Books in San Jose, hicklebys.com. It's also on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, borders.com, and Google it, you will find it.
Excellent. Michelle, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I'm sure our audience has learned a lot from Michelle with regards to what's involved in writing for children, particularly when featuring animals as characters. And as Michelle has shared with us, don't let anyone tell you no. If you've got an idea and you want to pursue it, you never know what's going to happen, but she's proven you can be quirky and succeed. To all of our viewers today, thank you so much for being with us. If you'd like to learn more about Michelle and her book, please visit the KAZV TV website. And thank you for being with us. Wishing you a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next Central Valley Writers Workshop. Have a great day.